Hey, John and Chris and whoever else on Twitter that might see this. Here's a totally real-time video on how to create a WordPress server that could serve a couple thousand requests per second. So I'm on DigitalOcean, which is a VPS provider. They just call their servers droplets, which is this dialog here, create droplet. So I'm about to make a 64-bit Ubuntu and then choose my size. You can change the resources for your droplet after the fact, but note that the minimum you can scale down to is the size you start with. So normally you would start with a $5 a month size and then immediately resize, and that's because you just can't scale down to a smaller disk after the fact. But for brevity's purposes, I'm going to start with like the $80 a month level, which is what you might want for your launch couple of days. Choose San Francisco and then just choose my pre-existing SSH keys that are on my computer and create droplet. I use DigitalOcean for a lot of my stuff, well basically all of my stuff at this point. TIG source is on the $10 a month level, and it has a fair amount of traffic. It's totally fine. IGF I scale up and down. Like I'll scale it up during Thanksgiving week, which is kind of when all the judges are able to judge. And then I'll scale it back down after the fact. It takes about a minute or two to scale anything. So their billing is hourly up to a monthly cap. So you actually could change to like an $80 a month tier, which is pretty beefy, just for launch week or launch day or whatever, and then scale it back down. Okay, so the server is now online. Get my IP, and I'm going to put my IP into Cloudflare just for DNS purposes. So let's do test witness, paste in my IP address, and it's not going through Cloudflare, which is like a caching service, but you probably would want to do Cloudflare online for your actual site. And then I'm using a second service called Server Pilot, which is going to control my server, but also do an initial LEMP setup, which is basically Nginx sits between Apache and the internet. So let's do test witness, and it wants me to paste this stuff into my server now. So testwitness.astest.com should be online already. So let's do testwitness.astest.com. I don't need to provide a password because it already has my private public key pairing stuff. And the server should be done booting in just a second. Probably still wrapping some stuff up, so it's a little bit chuggy at the moment. All right, so paste in my big scripty thing, which is going to take just a second here. And what this is going to do is basically configure the server, do a bunch of server updates, and then install some scripts that Server Pilot uses to basically puppet the server from their website into the server. So when I'm administering all my servers to add new sites or things, I'm not touching consoles anymore. I'm just using their website. This is kind of chuggy, but I'm sure things are destabilizing on fresh boot. Hopefully. So yeah, after a server is running, you can get all kinds of information out of DigitalOcean. So this is performing all of its updates, and as soon as it gets done doing like a standard Ubuntu update, Server Pilot will take over, and then we'll get WordPress on there and do some quick Apache bench concurrency testing. This is actually the longest part of the video, so I'm going to quick go grab some water. But you'll see that it's it's now configuring. Please do not stop, start, whatever, and then in my Server Pilot tab, it's taking over from here. So, all right, I will be back in 1 second. Enjoy this progress meter. All right, that didn't take very long. You'll see that in the progress meters here, it's actually installing 3 flavors of PHP. You can choose from PHP 5.4, 5.6, and 7.0 just because there's breaking changes between all of them because PHP is PHP, right? But whatever. And it's installing PHP in an FPM configuration, which is basically like a fast CGI type thing. I'm not actually super clear on the details, but that's the whole point, is I don't need to be super clear on the details, which I guess is what makes you hardcore programmer types really uncomfortable with web tech. But hey, this stuff works really great. So on the final step, which is just going to be running some kind of script. If I go to top, here you'll be able to see, and it's doing some kind of package stuff still on first boot, first configuration type deal. But this will be done in a second, and then we can get WordPress installed for testing. And for concurrency testing, I'm using Apache Bench, which is a really old testing tool that you just basically provide number of total requests, concurrency, and then just kind of some additional stuff. This is a window, because it's not super useful, but this is actually logged into another DigitalOcean droplet just because it has more bandwidth than I do at home, and I have a fair amount of bandwidth at home. And Aperture is my local server. It's a photography joke, not a portal joke, I swear. Okay, so on my server pilot interface, I can do create app. They just call things apps because everything's an app these days. And let's do test witness, testwitness.astest.com. And by default, it'll just be kind of an empty directory, but you can actually also just do a one-click WordPress install. So let's do test witness admin testing. Make sure I type that right. All right, and create app. So it actually also made a database for me and then pre-configured it with all the information, but if you're doing your own database stuff, it would be in here. All right, let's open a tab and try testwitness.astest.com. Here's our WordPress site, and let's log in immediately into the back end. The first thing I'm actually going to do is import some data, just so there's not just the single test post. Everything is now a importer plugin, of course. So activate plugin, run importer, choose my file, and this is just some sample posts that I found somewhere on the internet. Sure, that's fine. All right, so this is now running. Here we go, and there's just a bunch more posts. So hopefully this will simulate a heavier hit than just the test post. And then there is a pretty easy to use super cache plugin. So if we do plugins, add new, and it's super cache is one of the plugins that uses static files and not like memcache or something else. So activate plugin, and then just go to settings and turn caching on, update the status. Leaving everything else to default, we now have a cached WordPress install. So let's go to my local thing and let's do Apache Bench. Let's do 3,000 total requests, 300 concurrent at a time. Testing witness test witness, yeah, test witness. What just barfed? I swear that is correct. I swear I'm typing things correctly. But whatever, let's get rid of the HTTP. Sure, trailing slash. Oh, socket, too many files open. Whoops. I meant to do 300 and not 3,000. Alright, well, my local copy's gone to shit. I'm going to blame macOS, so let's hit it with the Linux one. Alright, so from the Linux server, we're seeing about 1,000 requests per second. And I'm actually going to, I guess, just use fewer sockets. I didn't even realize you could hit that limit. Let's do 100. Testwitness.astest.com, trailing slash. Ha! Alright, so from my local copy, it's doing it not quite as quickly, but it actually might be network. This is doing about 11 megabytes down per second when it was peaking. My pipe's actually about 30 megabytes per second, but it's a lot to go over the wire. So that was 300 requests, or 275 requests per second, with a 3 millisecond response time and 300 millisecond total transfer time. So one of the things I wanted to try, so this is the one that's in DigitalOcean, so you know it's right next to it. But let's do 30,000 requests, so it just keeps hitting it, right? So this is going to benchmark the holy shit out of Test Witness. And while it's doing that, from home, I can click on one of these pages, and it's a little bit delayed, right? It's not super zippy, but it's loading. It's loading pretty quickly for a site that's getting hit, you know, basically 30,000 times in the time it took me to click on those 3 pages. 1,700 requests per second. You know, time per request is much, much smaller, obviously, and it was actually transferring at 64 megabytes per second. And that's because this is also, you know, this is like one hop away, you know, traceroute. I think it's traceroute. I forget which platforms are traceRT. You know, this is like probably 1 hop, maybe 2 hops. So yeah, it's basically next door to it as a server. But again, like, or even spamming it locally, you know, this is hitting it locally, I can still click on a page and load it without any trouble. So again, just to complete this video, which it's not super long, 11 minutes, here's a window that's going to hit it 30,000 requests, 300 concurrent requests. And while it's doing that, you know, I'm clicking on posts. I haven't clicked on this post yet, so it's not cached, and it loaded up like maybe a half second slower than it should have, but it was loading up just fine. So yeah, there you go, 11 or 12 minutes to a WordPress server install that can sustain almost 2,000 requests per second. All right, hope this helps. Maybe you'll ignore it. All right, later. Bye.